wind was in our sails, we'd be all right. If the wind was in our sails, we'd be all right. If the wind was in our sails, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. Oh, it'd be all right if we make it around the horn. Oh, it'd be all right if we make it around the horn. Oh, it'd be all right if we make it around the horn, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. Well, a night on the town wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, a night on the town wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, a night on the town wouldn't do us any harm, and we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. Well, another festival wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another festival wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another festival wouldn't do us any harm, and we'll all hang on behind.
Hook the heads are up, the chests are out, the horns are swinging and pins count. Down low.
1, 2,
Down low.
3, 4.
Here's count.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's go back and count some more. Down low.
1, 2,
Down low.
3, 4.
Here's count.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
We will march to beat the band, and we'll never bite the hand. Down low.
1, 2,
Down low.
3, 4.
Here's count.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I had a good home, but I lived.
You're right.
I had a good home, but I lived.
You're right.
Jody was there when you lived.
You're right.
Jody was there when you lived.
You're right.
Down low.
1, 2,
Down low.
3, 4.
Here's count.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It won't get by, but it ain't the eye. It won't get by, but it ain't the eye.
Under a spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands. The smith, a mighty man is he, with large and blistered hands. And the muscles of his brawny arms are strong as iron bands. His hair is crisp and black and long, his face is like the tan. His brow is wet with honest sweat, he earns whate'er he can, and looks the whole world in the face, for he owes not any man. Goes on Sunday to the church and sits among his boys. He hears the parson pray and preach, he hears his daughter's voice, singing in the village choir, and it makes his heart rejoice. Toiling and sorrowing on through life he goes. Each morning sees some task begin, each evening sees it close. Something attempted, something done has earned a night's repose. thanks to thee, my worthy friend, for the lesson thou hast taught. Thus saith the flaming forge of life, our fortunes must be wrought. Thus on its sounding anvil shaped each burning deed and thought. Thus on its sounding anvil shaped each burning deed and thought.
Hello, my baby, sung by Arthur Collins. Hello, hello, Cecil, hello. Please don't cut me off that way. Hello, hello, what the hello? I've got a little baby, but she's out of sight. I talked to her across the telephone. I've never seen money, but she's mine, all right. So take my kiss and leave the cat alone. Every single morning you'll hear me yell, hey, Central, pick me up along the line. He connects me with my honey, then I ring the bell. And this is what I say to baby mine. Hello, my baby, hello, my honey, hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss, my wire. You hear me, baby? My heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me, then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own. Hello, hello, baby. Hello. I guess you don't hear me. The wires must be crossed somewhere. Hello, hello, what the hello? This morning through the phone, she said her name was Beth, and now I kinda knows where I'm at. I'd better slide because I've got my babe's address. You pasted in the lining of the hat. I am very scared because if the wires get crossed, will separate me from the baby mine. Then some other cool winner and the game is lost. And so each day I shout along the line. Hello, my baby, hello, my honey, hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss my way. You hear me, baby? My heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me, then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own. Why, dear, she is no. Hello, baby. down steel 33-foot rail. And we don't want to lose their thing. Of course, they put them in the market, but they won't fit like these. Now listen, I want you to get on that wheel and deal right at the end. And your quarter dog gonna catch your deal. Now when I want you to get on there to the end now, wheel and deal. And when I holler deal, break off in the quarter down there. Pick up all along, come on quarter dog. Walk up close to the car now, and inside men, step out. Outside, pull up, good and strong. Head high, throw it away. That's a good reel, I hear it ring. We're going back now and get another. Now stand hitched a minute. Deal down there, John Williams. Break off in your quarter dog. Pick up all along and turn the ball to your back. Walk like I tell you. Walk up close to the car, boys. Study your step. Head high, throw it away. Good on, I hear them ring. Come on walking on back. Now get this reel right over here now, John. Deal, John. Break off in the quarter there, Johnny. Pick up and walk. End men stay at the end. Quarter men step up close by. Head high, throw it away. Good on. Come on walking on back. Come on back now, I'm gonna deal. Catch my deal. Break off in the quarter down there. All along, boys. Walking wondering, don't you grumble. Head high, throw it away. That's good on, I hear them ring. Come on walking on back. You're gonna deal up there, deal the reel. It haven't got no angle bars on it. Deal by the ball, I told you. Pick up all along. Turn the ball to your belly. Now walk to the car. Steady yourself. Head high. Throw it away. Good on. I hear it ring. Come on back and get another. We ain't got but about 10 more now. Deal in the quarter. Break off in the quarter down there. Come on walking to the car. Steady yourself. Head high. Throw it away. Good on. I hear it ring.
Once upon a time in Arkansas, an old man sat at his little cabin door and fiddled out a tune that he liked to hear. A jolly old tune that he played by ear. It was raining hard, but the fiddler didn't care. He sawed away at the popular air, and his rooftop leaked like a waterfall. But it didn't seem to bother the man at all. A traveler was riding by day and stopped to hear him practicing away. The cabin was afloat and his feet were wet, but still the old man didn't seem to fret. So the stranger said, now the way it seems to me, you'd better mend your roof, said he. But the old man said as he played away, I couldn't mend it now, it's a rainy day. The traveler replied, that's all quite true, but this I think is the thing for you to do. Get busy on a day that is fair and bright, then patch the old roof till it's good and tight. But the old man kept on a-playing at his reel and tapped the ground with his leathery heel. Get along, said he, for you're giving me a pain. My cabin never leaks when it doesn't rain.
that's when we